"Ma'am, you'll have to give up your seat for him." The words sliced through the quiet hum of the business class cabin like a cold blade. Dr. Naomi Carter froze, her hand still on the armrest of seat 2A, as a tall white man in a tailored navy suit stepped forward. His name, she'd later learn, was Richard Hale, a valued frequent flyer, according to the flight attendant standing firmly at his side. It was supposed to be a seamless trip. Los Angeles to Tokyo. 11 hours of quiet, preparation, and rest before a contract signing worth over $400 million. Naomi had boarded early, storing her laptop bag neatly above her, slipping into her seat with the calm precision of someone who's been here 1,000 times before. She had paid for this seat. She had earned this seat. And yet, here she was, being told to move. The attendant's voice carried the kind of politeness that isn't polite at all. "Company policy," she said, glancing at Richard as though the matter was already decided. Naomi looked up, meeting her gaze. "My ticket says 2A. My name is on it." A pause. Then that smile, the one people give when they think you'll just go along to avoid a scene. "You can still make yourself comfortable in economy," the attendant added, as if it were a favor. From the corner of her eye, Naomi saw other passengers watching. Some with mild curiosity, some with awkward discomfort, and some deliberately avoiding eye contact. She'd felt this weight before, the unspoken assumption about who belonged where. But this time was different. This time, they had no idea who she was. 15 minutes later, the CEO of this very airline would be wide awake, staring at a conference call full of furious board members, and Dr. Naomi Carter's name would be at the center of every sentence. "Before we get there, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been judged? Not for what you did, but for what you look like? Press 1 in the comments if it's happened to you. Press 2 if you've seen it happen to someone else. Buckle up. Because this flight is about to hit turbulence, and it has nothing to do with the weather." Dr. Naomi Carter wasn't just another well-dressed traveler in a business class seat. She was a self-made powerhouse. Born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana, Naomi grew up in a modest 2-bedroom home with her mother, a public school teacher, and her grandfather, a retired Army mechanic. Her upbringing was far from luxurious, but it was rich in discipline, education, and the quiet belief that excellence was not optional, it was expected. By the time she was 18, Naomi had earned a full scholarship to Harvard University. She went on to complete her MBA at the Wharton School of Business, where she specialized in global finance and corporate strategy. After graduation, she worked for some of the most powerful investment firms on Wall Street. But corporate ceilings, and the subtle, often unspoken biases that held them in place, made her realize she would never reach her full potential working for someone else. So, at 29, she left a lucrative senior position and started her own company, Carter Global Solutions, out of a small rented office in downtown Atlanta. The business specialized in financial security infrastructure, a highly technical field most people didn't even understand. Within 10 years, Naomi had transformed it into a multi-billion-dollar corporation, protecting the digital assets of Fortune 500 companies and global banks. Her client list included industry giants from New York to London to Tokyo. Today, Naomi Carter was not just the CEO of Carter Global Solutions. She was also a major investor in Pacific Skies Group, the parent company of the very airline she was flying with. That stake was strategic, a move to diversify her portfolio and influence industries notorious for their lack of diversity in leadership. This trip to Tokyo was not leisure. She was scheduled to sign a $400 million partnership agreement with a Japanese investment conglomerate, a deal that had been in negotiation for over a year. Every detail had been planned with military precision. The timing, the talking points, even the seating arrangement at the signing table. That's why she had booked seat 2A on this flight, the most private spot in the front row of business class. It gave her easy aisle access, a clear view of the cabin, and enough space to review sensitive documents without prying eyes. She wasn't traveling for comfort. She was traveling for control, efficiency, and performance. What Naomi didn't know when she walked into Los Angeles International Airport that morning was that this flight would test more than her patience. It would test her principles, her influence, and the very reason she built power in the first place. It started before she even reached the gate. Naomi arrived at the airline's premium check-in counter, pulling her sleek black carry-on behind her, business class ticket in hand. The counter agent, a young man with a stiff smile, glanced up, and for a split second, something shifted in his expression. "Economy check-in is down there," he said, motioning vaguely toward the long line wrapping around the corner. Naomi kept her tone steady. I'm flying business class. Seat 2A. She slid her ticket and passport across the counter. The agent's eyes flicked to the documents, then back to her. Oh, I see. His voice softened, but the lack of apology was deafening. He processed her boarding pass in silence, handing it back without the warm, "Enjoy your flight," he'd given the passenger before her. At the security checkpoint, Naomi moved quickly through the TSA pre-check lane, then made her way toward the airline's exclusive lounge. The frosted glass doors opened into a quiet, softly lit space, the kind of place designed to make high-paying travelers feel special. She barely stepped inside before the lounge attendant, a woman in her 40s with a practiced customer service smile, intercepted her. "Ma'am, this lounge is for business class passengers and platinum members only." Naomi held up her boarding pass and elite status card. "As you can see, I qualify for both." The attendant scanned them as though she expected to find a forgery. "We've had people try to sneak in before," she said, her voice dripping with suspicion. Naomi didn't respond. She'd learned long ago that sometimes silence says more than any retort. She walked past the reception desk, choosing a quiet corner table near the window. From there, she could see the staff warmly greeting other travelers, offering them drinks, light conversation, and smiles that never reached her. It was subtle. No outright insult. No blatant refusal. But it was the kind of treatment that erodes at the edges of your dignity. The raised eyebrows, the extra scrutiny, the pauses that last just long enough to make you feel out of place. Naomi sipped a glass of water, opened her laptop, and reviewed her presentation slides for the Tokyo meeting. She told herself not to dwell on it. This wasn't the first time she'd been underestimated, but deep down, she knew. The small moments were warning signs. And if there was one thing Naomi Carter had learned in business, small warning signs often precede very big problems. When the first boarding call for business class passengers echoed through the terminal, Naomi gathered her bag, smoothed the front of her white suit jacket, and headed toward the gate. She was ready to settle into her seat, get a head start on reviewing the final negotiation documents, and slip into her pre-meeting routine. At the gate, a young boarding agent scanned the tickets of passengers ahead of her, greeting them warmly. But when Naomi stepped forward, the agent's smile faltered. "One moment, ma'am," he said, holding her boarding pass just out of reach. Naomi arched an eyebrow. "Is there a problem?" "We just need to double-check something," he replied, glancing toward another agent as if waiting for a silent approval. Other passengers walked around her, scanning their passes without delay. Naomi stood there, calm but unblinking. "This is a business class boarding call, correct?" "Yes, but..." "Then you should scan my ticket and let me board," she said, her voice even but leaving no room for debate. The agent hesitated for another beat, then finally beeped her pass and waved her through with a mumbled, "Enjoy your flight." Naomi stepped down the jet bridge, the faint hum of the engines growing louder with each step. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere shifted instantly. The cool air, the soft lighting, the quiet shuffle of passengers arranging their belongings. She found seat 2A, a wide leather recliner with a crisp white pillow and a neatly folded blanket waiting. She placed her laptop bag in the overhead bin, slid into her seat, and exhaled. The flight attendant moving through the aisle poured glasses of champagne for other passengers, their flutes catching the warm light. When she reached Naomi's row, her tray held only orange juice and water. Naomi pressed the call button. "I'd like the pre-departure champagne, please," she requested politely. The attendant's lips tightened into a polite smile that didn't touch her eyes. "Of course," she said, disappearing toward the galley. When she returned, she set down a glass of orange juice instead. "That's not..." Naomi began, but stopped herself. She picked up the glass, her expression neutral. The small slights from earlier echoed in her mind. The hesitation, the questioning, the substitutions. She could feel the pattern forming, and she knew, instinctively, this flight was about to test her in ways she hadn't planned for. Naomi had just powered on her laptop when a shadow fell across her seat. "I believe you're in my spot," a man's voice said. She looked up to see Richard Hale, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing an expensive navy suit and an expression that suggested he wasn't used to hearing the word no. His boarding pass was still tucked into the leather passport wallet in his hand. Naomi kept her tone even. "This is 2A. That's my assigned seat." She held up her ticket for him to see. Richard didn't look at it. Instead, he turned toward the aisle and motioned to the flight attendant. "Melissa, there's been a mix-up. You know I always book 2A. Melissa Grant, the lead flight attendant, approached with a kind of smile designed to soothe one party while managing the other. The problem was, it was obvious who she intended to soothe. "Mr. Hale is one of our most valued frequent flyers," Melissa said, her voice warm toward him, cool toward Naomi. "Would you mind relocating so we can accommodate him?" Naomi blinked, then let out a short breath. "Yes, I would mind. I purchased this seat weeks ago, and my name is on the ticket." Melissa's smile thinned. "Company policy allows us to reassign seating when necessary." Naomi closed her laptop. Necessary for what? Convenience? Comfort? Or just preference? Richard shifted impatiently. "Look, I've got an important meeting as soon as we land. I need this particular seat." Naomi turned to face him fully. "So do I. And I had it first." By now, passengers in the rows around them were watching. Some leaned forward slightly, others pretended to scroll through their phones while clearly listening. Melissa lowered her voice, as though that would make the request less insulting. "We can move you to an economy seat. Of course, we'll refund the fare difference." Naomi's jaw tightened. "That's not acceptable." Melissa straightened, her tone shifting from persuasive to procedural. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to insist." There it was, the line that told Naomi the decision had already been made. She could make a scene here in the aisle, or she could choose her battlefield more strategically. She reached for a phone, opened the Notes app, and began typing. "I'll move," she said evenly, under protest, "but I'll need your full name and employee ID for my records." Melissa hesitated, then gave them. Naomi gathered her things, the humiliation sharp and familiar, and began the long walk down the aisle toward economy, every step sealing her resolve. Naomi stepped into the narrow aisle, her laptop bag slung over one shoulder, the handle of her carry-on in her hand. The hum of quiet conversations in business class seemed to fade, replaced by the low thud of her own heartbeat. As she moved forward earlier, the rows had felt like markers of status. Plush leather seats, champagne glasses catching the cabin lights, passengers already reclined in comfort. Now, walking the other way, each row felt like a step down in more ways than one. Some passengers avoided her eyes, shifting in their seats as if they could erase their presence from the moment. Others glanced at her openly, a mixture of curiosity and discomfort flickering across their faces. A few had the decency to look embarrassed. Richard Hale, now settling into 2A, didn't meet her gaze at all. He was already speaking to Melissa, his voice low and casual, as though the whole incident had been nothing more than a minor scheduling issue. Naomi kept her expression neutral, but inside, the humiliation burned. She had worked her way into spaces exactly like this her entire career. Boardrooms, private lounges, first-class cabins, only to have someone decide she didn't belong there after all. This wasn't new. But this time, she wasn't just another passenger. The farther she walked, the more the cabin changed. Leather became fabric. Spacious seating turned into tight rows. The soft clink of champagne flutes gave way to the rattle of soda cans and the rustle of snack bags. Her assigned replacement seat was 32B, middle, of course. She slid her carry-on into the overhead bin, maneuvered past a man already sprawled into both armrests, and sat down. The aisle seat was occupied by a woman in her late 50s with kind eyes and a faint Japanese accent. "That wasn't right, what they did to you," the woman whispered. Naomi glanced at her, the edges of her frustration softening for a moment. "Thank you," she said quietly. The man to her left didn't even move his elbow from her ribcage. Naomi adjusted herself, pulled out her phone, and began writing. She documented every detail, names, times, exact words. Years of navigating corporate discrimination had taught her one rule: document everything. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The fight just wasn't going to happen here in row 32. It was going to happen where she held the most power, far above the cabin crew's authority. Naomi sat in the cramped middle seat of row 32, her knees almost touching the seat in front of her. The hum of the engines was steady, but her mind was moving at a much faster pace. She had learned long ago that in situations like this, the most effective response wasn't anger in the moment, it was strategy after the fact. She reached into her laptop bag, pulled out her phone, and switched it to airplane mode, but not before sending one final message through her secure business network. It was addressed to her general counsel, her chief financial officer, and the chairman of the board at Pacific Skies Group. The subject line was short and lethal: immediate board review, Flight 276 incident. Few people on this aircraft knew the truth. Naomi Carter wasn't just a passenger. She wasn't just a CEO. She was also a major shareholder in Pacific Skies Group, the parent company of the very airline she was sitting on. Her investment group owned 35% of the company's voting stock. In corporate terms, that wasn't influence. That was power. She hadn't acquired the stake for vanity. She'd done it to diversify her portfolio and, more importantly, to influence an industry plagued by the very problem she'd just experienced. Airlines were notorious for their lack of diversity in leadership, and she had planned to push for change from the inside. She hadn't expected to be handed a live case study mid-flight. Her thumbs moved quickly over the screen, composing a bullet-point timeline of what had just happened. The gate delay, the lack of service in business class, the forced relocation, the dismissive language. Every word was factual, stripped of emotion, but the picture it painted was damning. She attached a note: "This incident will be addressed immediately upon landing. Prepare the necessary protocols for a special session." Naomi set the phone down and opened her laptop. The seat was cramped, the man to her left still monopolizing both armrests, but she worked as if she were in a corner office. Her focus was razor sharp. When she finished drafting the preliminary report, she closed her laptop and sat back, a faint, controlled smile on her face. Melissa in business class thought she had removed Naomi from her seat. In reality, she had just moved Naomi into position. And soon, the entire leadership of Pacific Skies Group would understand exactly how costly that decision was. 2,500 miles away, in a glass-walled boardroom overlooking Manhattan, a secure phone on the center table began to ring. It was 3:07 a.m. Eastern Time. The night secretary for Pacific Skies Group answered, her voice tight. "We have an emergency communication from Dr. Naomi Carter. She's on Flight 276 to Tokyo." Within minutes, the company's encrypted messaging network lit up. Directors from New York, Chicago, and San Francisco joined a hastily convened video conference, some still in pajamas, others in rumpled suits pulled on in the dark. Faces were pale, voices clipped. The chairman leaned forward. "Why are we waking the board in the middle of the night?" The general counsel spoke first. "Because a major shareholder, one who holds 35% voting power, has documented a case of discriminatory treatment on our flagship airline, mid-flight, in real time." Silence fell over the room. Every person there understood what that meant. This wasn't a complaint from a random passenger. This was coming from someone with the power to move stock prices, influence investor confidence, and trigger leadership changes. Details were read aloud. Denied normal boarding process despite valid business class ticket. Targeted with unnecessary credential checks in the lounge. Skipped over for pre-departure service. Removed from seat 2A in favor of a white male passenger, without verification. Offered economy seating as compensation. The chairman's voice hardened. "Where's Edward Bonds?" The airline CEO was patched into the call from his home, his tie loose, eyes red. "This is the first I'm hearing of it," he insisted. "That's the problem," the chairman shot back. "By the time you hear about it, it's already on its way to becoming a public relations wildfire." Orders were issued. Barnes was to prepare a preliminary incident response before the plane even landed in Tokyo. The Internal Investigations Unit was activated. The corporate communications team began drafting contingency statements for media outlets in case the story broke early. Meanwhile, aboard Flight 276, a short, encrypted message pinged to the crew's tablets. "VIP shareholder on board. Immediate service review. Maintain discretion." Melissa, standing in the galley, read the alert twice. Her eyes flicked toward row 32. For the first time since boarding, she looked uneasy. Naomi didn't see the message. She didn't need to. She could already feel the shift in the air, the subtle scramble of an organization realizing it had just made a catastrophic mistake. It started with a shadow in the aisle. Naomi looked up from her laptop to see Melissa standing there, hands clasped in front of her like she was approaching a VIP guest at a charity gala. Gone was the clipped, authoritative tone from earlier. In its place was a sugary politeness that felt as artificial as the cabin's recycled air. "Dr. Carter," Melissa began, forcing a smile. "We've arranged for you to return to your original seat in business class. We'd be happy to make you comfortable for the remainder of the flight." Naomi closed her laptop slowly. "That won't be necessary." Melissa blinked. "Excuse me. I'll remain right here. This is the seat your crew decided was appropriate for me. I wouldn't want to confuse the record. Melissa's smile faltered. I understand, but… No, Naomi cut in, her voice even but unshakable. What I do want is documentation. A written statement from you and from Mr. Hale's advocate in the cabin, the one who facilitated my removal, acknowledging exactly what happened before takeoff. Names, times, the company's stated reason for moving me. Melissa shifted uncomfortably. I'm not sure if policy allows. Company policy also doesn't allow discriminatory treatment of paying customers, Naomi said, holding her gaze. Yet here we are. The man in the aisle seat, still hugging both armrests, leaned back slightly to watch the exchange. Passengers across the row were pretending not to listen, but their posture told the truth. Every ear was tuned in. Melissa cleared her throat. Now, see what I can do. She stepped away, her heels clicking down the aisle. 10 minutes later, Chris Dalton, another senior attendant, appeared. He crouched slightly to speak at Naomi's eye level. Dr. Carter, I just want to apologize personally. We value your business and… This isn't about my business, Naomi said. It's about your culture, your processes, the decisions your crew makes when they think no one's looking. Chris nodded, his jaw tightening. Understood. We'll make sure this is addressed. I'll make sure, Naomi corrected softly. As Chris walked away, Naomi felt the air in the cabin shift again. The crew wasn't just reacting to a dissatisfied customer anymore. They were reacting to a force they didn't quite understand, and that made them nervous. She picked up her pen, adding another note to her growing record. Offered return to business class, declined. Requested written acknowledgement, pending. The battlefield had officially moved from Seat 2A to the boardroom. The wheels touched down at Narita International Airport with a soft thud, and the familiar chimes signaled the end of the flight. Passengers unbuckled, stretching limbs and pulling bags from overhead bins. But Naomi stayed seated, calm, composed, her carry-on still tucked neatly above her. She knew what waited outside the cabin doors. Through the oval window, she caught a glimpse of the jet bridge, a line of dark suits and lanyards standing just behind security officers. Farther back, flashes popped in the air like bursts of lightning. News cameras. Microphones. This wasn't going to be a quiet arrival. Melissa appeared again, her voice pitched low. Dr. Carter, there's a delegation from corporate waiting to escort you to the VIP lounge for a private debriefing. Naomi smiled faintly. No, thank you. I'll deplane with everyone else. Fairness starts with walking out the same way I came in. Melissa hesitated, then stepped aside. Row by row, passengers exited, some glancing back toward Naomi, others giving subtle nods of respect. When her row was called, she rose, adjusted her jacket, and began walking toward the front. Business class passengers, now aware of who she was, shifted uncomfortably in their seats as she passed. At the cabin door, the corporate representatives waited, including the airline's Asia-Pacific Regional Director, who extended a hand. Dr. Carter, we'd like to personally apologize for… Naomi didn't slow her stride. Save it. I believe the cameras are ready for us. The moment she stepped into the terminal, a wave of reporters surged forward. Security held them back just enough to prevent chaos, but the questions came rapid fire. Dr. Carter, is it true you were removed from your seat for another passenger? Will you be taking legal action against the airline? What does this mean for Pacific Skies Group's leadership? Naomi stopped just short of the press line, her voice steady but carrying. Yes, I was moved from a paid business class seat to economy, not because of overbooking, not because of safety, but because of a judgment call rooted in bias. And no, this isn't about one seat or one flight. This is about a pattern in an industry that should know better. Flashes erupted again. The regional director shifted uncomfortably beside her. Naomi continued, change doesn't happen behind closed doors. It happens out here, where accountability has an audience. That's why I'm speaking now, before I even leave the terminal. The cameras kept rolling, and the real turbulence for the airline was only beginning. By the time Naomi reached her hotel in downtown Tokyo, the story had already gone global. Major news networks were running split-screen coverage. On one side, her calm but firm statement in Narita's terminal. On the other, industry analysts debating the potential impact on Pacific Skies Group's stock and reputation. In New York, the board of directors was still in emergency session. The atmosphere was tense, the kind that clung to the walls long after the meeting ended. Every director understood this wasn't just a customer service misstep, it was a governance crisis. By mid-afternoon Tokyo time, Edward Barnes, the airline CEO, had been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. The announcement came with a press release that tried to balance contrition with control, but the language couldn't disguise the magnitude of the decision. The board moved quickly. Within 48 hours, they rolled out a temporary leadership team headed by the company's COO, tasked with stabilizing operations while the investigation proceeded. A new directive was issued to all employees. Any incident involving potential discrimination at any level would trigger immediate escalation to corporate leadership. Naomi, meanwhile, worked quietly from her hotel suite, participating in video calls with the board and advising on next steps. She wasn't interested in public theatrics. She was interested in results. Her recommendations were blunt. A passenger bill of rights, legally enforceable, guaranteeing no passenger could be involuntarily downgraded except for safety reasons. Mandatory implicit bias and cultural competency training for all customer-facing employees, reviewed annually. A new passenger advocacy department with the authority to intervene in real time when complaints arose. The board adopted all three measures. Within a week, Pacific Skies Group had also committed $10 million to fund initiatives combating discrimination in the travel industry. The company announced the creation of an independent oversight council, including civil rights organizations, consumer advocates, and former airline executives, to audit compliance and report findings publicly. Industry reaction was swift. Competing airlines scrambled to review their own policies, some issuing preemptive statements to avoid being compared unfavorably. Travel blogs and consumer rights groups hailed Naomi's stance as a turning point for passenger equity. In Tokyo, the signing of Naomi's $400 million partnership deal went ahead as scheduled. Only now, she walked into the conference room with the full weight of an international headline at her back. The Japanese executives greeted her not just as a business partner, but as a woman who had just reshaped an industry mid-flight. Naomi's return flight to the United States was quiet, almost eerily so. There were no double takes at the gate, no unnecessary checks of her credentials, no one moment, ma'am, delays. The crew greeted her warmly, the way they greeted every other passenger, and that, she thought, was the real victory. As she settled into her seat, she reflected on the whirlwind of the past 2 weeks, how a humiliating moment had become a catalyst for something far larger than herself. She hadn't set out to make headlines. She'd set out to sign a deal in Tokyo. But life rarely announces when it's about to hand you a defining moment. She realized that power, in its truest form, isn't about what you can get away with or how many doors open for you. It's about how you use it when the door is slammed shut in your face. She could have accepted the seat change, taken the refund, and moved on. But she knew that if she stayed silent, the same thing would happen to someone else, someone without the platform, the resources, or the influence to fight back. From that perspective, she had no choice but to act. Her experience had reinforced a truth she'd carried since her early days in business. Document everything, speak up when it matters, and be strategic about your response. It wasn't about ego. It was about impact. Naomi knew the changes at Pacific Skies Group would ripple outward, to other airlines, to other industries, to everyday interactions where bias hides in plain sight. And she knew those changes wouldn't have happened if she had fought only for herself instead of for the principle. As the plane climbed into the night sky, she opened her laptop and typed the final line of her keynote speech for an upcoming leadership conference. Real leadership isn't proven when you're treated like you belong. It's proven when you demand that everyone is treated like they do. She saved the file, closed the laptop, and looked out over the dark Pacific. Somewhere below, thousands of other travelers were on their own journeys. She hoped, because of what happened on Flight 276, those journeys would now be a little more equal, and a lot more just. If you've ever been treated unfairly while traveling, or seen it happen to someone else, I want to hear your story. Comment 1 if you've experienced it firsthand. Comment 2 if you've witnessed it happen. And if Naomi's stand for fairness inspired you, hit that like button so more people can hear stories like this. Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful true stories about standing up, speaking out, and creating real change. Because sometimes, one person's choice to speak up can change the way an entire industry treats people.